The notification came on a Tuesday morning, the kind of gray October day when the heat hasn't quite kicked in, and the house smells like old wood and coffee. I was still in my robe, cup in hand, scrolling through my phone before I'd even put my glasses on, and that's when I saw it. An Evite. My son-in-law's mother had forwarded it to me, just tapped share and sent it along like she was passing me a recipe. The subject line read, "The Prescott family cordially invites you to a housewarming open house." I had to read it twice to understand why something felt wrong, and then I saw the address. My address. The house on Clover Mill Road. The one my parents bought in 1971. The one I grew up in, learned to ride a bike in the driveway of, cried in when my father died. The one Jean and I fixed up together after my mother passed and left it to me. The one my daughter had been living in, with her husband, for going on 3 years, rent-free, because I wanted her to get settled, because I believed in giving people a soft landing. The hosts listed were Richard and Sylvia Prescott and family. Not me. My daughter's name wasn't even on it, and certainly not mine. I set my coffee down and sat very still. The refrigerator hummed. A cardinal landed on the feeder outside the window, bright as a warning. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I've been honest about very little for too long. It wasn't just hurt. It was the specific, airless feeling of realizing that something you assumed was still yours, still you, had been quietly transferred to someone else's story without your knowledge or consent. I had become, in that invitation, a guest at my own address. My daughter was 26 when Jean died. Pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She'd just started a new job in the city and was barely keeping her head above water, and suddenly her father was gone and the ground under all of us shifted. I held us both together the way women of my generation learned to, by not stopping. I kept teaching. I kept the house. I kept calling, checking in, sending food. You do what you do because stopping means looking at the hole, and the hole is too big to look at straight. She met her husband through work. He was charming at first. The kind of charming that runs a little hot, a little smooth, like a freshly waxed floor, beautiful but difficult to get traction on. His family had money, old money in the way that's more about posture than portfolio. His mother had a way of looking around a room like she was appraising it. The first time she came to the house on Clover Mill Road, she walked through the front hall and said, "Oh, isn't this quaint?" She meant it as a compliment. I knew even then that she didn't. When my daughter asked if she and her husband could stay at the house while they figured things out, I said yes, without a second thought. It was my house. It had 2 empty bedrooms and she was my daughter. Those were the only 3 facts that mattered to me. That was 3 years ago. In those 3 years, I had been to the house on Clover Mill Road 11 times. I counted once when I couldn't sleep. 11 times in 36 months. Every visit involved some version of my son-in-law being polite in the practiced, surface way of someone who is tolerating a situation they consider temporary. Every visit involved my daughter, hovering a little, laughing a little too brightly, refilling glasses, smoothing things over. Every visit left me driving home, feeling smaller than when I'd arrived. I had told myself this was normal. Families adjust. Marriages take time, give them space. I had given them 3 years of space, and they'd used it to throw a party in my house without inviting me. I called my friend Rita that morning. She answered before the second ring, which meant she was already up and in her garden, phone in her apron pocket. "Something happened," I said. She didn't ask what, she just said, "Tell me." I read her the Evite, all of it. The flourished font, the little leaf motif, the please RSVP by October 20th. Rita was quiet for a moment. "Is the house still in your name?" she asked. "Of course it is." "Have you checked recently?" I hadn't. It had never occurred to me to check, the way it never occurs to you to check that the ground is still under your feet until one day you step and it isn't. "Go find the paperwork," she said, "before you do anything else." I went to the filing cabinet in my bedroom. The brown one Jean bought at an estate sale and repainted cream because I wanted something cheerful near the window. 3rd drawer, back behind the tax folders. The deed was there in a manila envelope. The paper inside heavier than I remembered, official and absolute. I opened it with the same care you'd use on something fragile. The property at 4 Clover Mill Road was deeded solely to me. My full name, my signature, my name alone, since Gene's name had been removed when I'd had the estate settled after he passed. My daughter's name appeared nowhere. My son-in-law's name appeared nowhere. My house. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time holding that piece of paper. Outside, the cardinal was back on the feeder. I thought about Gene and how he used to call that table the neighborhood boardroom because every decision we'd ever made of any importance somehow got made there. I thought about what he would have said if he were here. He would have said, "Well, now you know." I didn't call my daughter that day. I'd learned in the years since she married that phone calls in these situations had a way of dissolving into tone and silence and misread pauses. And then nothing changed except the distance between us grew a little more familiar, a little more permanent. I didn't want a phone call. I wanted to be seen. I called a woman named Edith from the county assessor's office instead. We'd gone to church together for 15 years and asked a few careful questions about property rights and event usage. She confirmed what I already suspected. No lease, no usage agreement, no transfer of any kind meant no legal right to host a private event without the owner's written consent. I was the owner. Then I drove to the house. I hadn't been since June, 4 months. I'd told myself it was because I was busy, because the drive was long, because they were settled now and didn't need me hovering. All of that was true in the small way that truths can be small when they're covering something larger. The house looked different from the street. The old shutters, Gene-painted navy blue, were gone, replaced with something dark green that didn't suit the brickwork. There were potted ornamental cabbages on the front steps, the kind from a garden center, uniform and cheerless. A wreath on the door that wasn't mine. The porch light had been replaced with something bronze and modern that belonged on a downtown condo, not on a 1971 ranch house on a maple-lined street. I sat in the car for a few minutes, just sat, my hands on the steering wheel. My father had planted that maple when my mother was pregnant with me. I used to catch its seeds in my palms as a child, the little helicopter ones, and watch them spin down to the grass when I let them go. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I didn't knock, it was my house. I had a key on a keychain shaped like a schoolhouse that one of my students had given me my last year of teaching. I let myself in. The front hall smelled different. Something expensive and synthetic, one of those plug-in diffusers. The coat hooks Gene had installed, the ones with the little painted ceramic tops, one for each of us, were gone. In their place was a sleek bronze rack I'd never seen. My daughter came out of the kitchen first. She was holding a dish towel and wearing an apron I didn't recognize. Her face went through 3 expressions in about 1 second: surprise, guilt, and then something she worked quickly to smooth into a cautious smile. "Mom, I didn't know you were." "I was in the neighborhood," I said. That wasn't true, but it wasn't the point. My son-in-law appeared behind her. He was in a fleece vest and wool socks, holding a glass of something amber. He looked at me the way he always did, pleasantly, blankly, the way you look at a neighbor's dog that has wandered into your yard. My name from his mouth has always sounded like a door being politely but firmly closed. "I got an invitation," I said, "to my own address." My daughter's face stilled. She glanced at her husband. He took a sip of his drink. "We've been planning a small open house," he said. "Nothing too formal, just a way for my family to see the place." "Your family," I repeated. "And our friends, some neighbors." "My neighbors," I said. He set down his glass. "We've been here 3 years. We've made this space our own." I reached into my bag and pulled out the deed. I hadn't planned to do it that dramatically. It just seemed like the right thing to hold in that moment, not as a weapon, but as a fact. "You've been living here 3 years," I said, "in my space, with my permission, which I can rescind." My daughter made a small sound, not quite a word. I turned to her. "Did you know they were sending invitations with your father-in-law's name listed as host at my address?" She looked at the floor. That was answer enough. "My mother put together the invite list," my son-in-law said, his voice shifting to the tone men use when they want to seem reasonable. "She must have assumed." "She assumed this house was yours," I said, "because no one corrected her. Because your name is the one on the mailbox." I hadn't known that, but I saw by the way he didn't deny it that I was right. I put a nameplate on the box, he said, just for delivery purposes. My daughter finally looked up. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't realize how it would look. It doesn't look like anything, I said quietly. It is something. Your name is on the mailbox. Your family is throwing the party. My name is nowhere. I paused. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern. We stood in the front hall of my parents' house. Under the light fixture my father rewired himself the summer of 1979. And the silence between us was the kind that has years in it. They didn't cancel the party. I didn't ask them to. What I asked for was a conversation. A real one, at the kitchen table, and what I received was my son-in-law's version of reasonableness, which involved several variations on "you have to understand," and "this isn't what it looks like," and "we're just trying to make a life here." My daughter sat between us and said very little, which was itself a kind of statement. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "The party can happen. I'd like to be there." My son-in-law blinked. "Of course, you're always welcome." "Not as a guest," I said, "as the owner of the house." The distinction hung in the air. He understood it. He just hadn't expected me to say it plainly. "And the nameplate on the mailbox gets changed," I added, "before next week." My daughter nodded. My son-in-law looked out the window at the maple tree. I think he was calculating something, what it would cost him to argue, what it would cost him not to. He was the kind of man who made decisions in columns. I had learned to be fine with that. It just meant I needed my column to be the longer one. "Fine," he said. It wasn't gracious, but it was yes. The open house was on a Saturday. October light, which is the best kind. Gold and a little melancholy, the way afternoons feel when you're old enough to know they don't last. I arrived early. Not to help set up, not to hover, but because it was my house and I arrived when I chose to. His family came in waves. His mother first, in a camel coat and good earrings, with the kind of posture that announces money before a word is spoken. She saw me near the fireplace. My mother's fireplace, the one with the slate surround. Jean had repointed the summer before he got sick, and stopped. "Oh," she said, "I didn't realize you'd be here." "This is my home," I said. I thought the invitation made that clear. I watched her recalibrate. To her credit, she did it smoothly. "Of course, how lovely." I didn't let her move past it. "Your Evite listed you and Richard as hosts. At this address." I wanted to make sure we'd had a chance to clear that up. She smiled. The kind of smile that costs nothing. "Oh, that was just a formality." "Whose formality?" I asked. "My name is on the deed. It has been for over 40 years. She looked toward her son across the room. He was watching us. He gave the smallest shake of his head. I chose to interpret that as a signal to his mother, not to me, and I kept my eyes on her. "I see," she said finally. "Good," I said, and I excused myself to get a glass of water from my kitchen. There were maybe 30 people there by noon. I knew 4 of them, 2 couples from the neighborhood who came over with their casserole dishes and their reliable kindness, the kind of people who show up whether they're invited or not, because showing up is simply who they are. The others were my son-in-law's orbit. Work, colleagues, college friends, a few of his mother's acquaintances in expensive shoes. I sat in the living room and let the party happen around me. I wasn't going to be difficult. I wasn't going to make a scene, but I wasn't going to be invisible either. At some point, one of his colleagues, a young woman with a clipboard who I believe was there in some kind of coordinating capacity, came over and asked if I needed anything. "I'm fine, thank you," I said. "I live here." She looked confused. "Oh, I thought this was the Prescott place." "My daughter is Mrs. Prescott," I said, "and this is her mother's house." She nodded slowly, uncertain whether this was drama or just information. I gave her a calm smile so she'd understand it was just information. My daughter found me just before lunch. She came and sat next to me on the settee, the one I'd reupholstered twice, most recently in a dusty blue that Jean said looked like a winter sky, and we sat for a moment without talking. "I should have handled this differently," she said. "Yes," I said, not to punish her, just because it was true. "He takes over things," she said quietly. "It's just how he is, he assumes. And I let him." I turned to look at her. She was 41 now, my daughter. There were things in her face I recognized. My mother's forehead, Jean's eyes, and things that were entirely her own, small worried lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. You don't have to let him, I said. I know. Do you? She didn't answer right away. We sat there in the noise of the party, in the house where she'd learned to walk, and I could see her thinking about it. Really thinking, not performing thought. I got comfortable, she said finally. Not in a good way, in the way where you stop noticing you've stopped speaking up, until one day you try to, and you've forgotten how. I knew that feeling. I had lived inside it for 3 years. That's why I'm here, I said, to remind you. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. Just for a second. And then she straightened up and smoothed her skirt and became herself again. The put-together version. The one that functioned at parties. But in that second, I felt the distance between us close the way a window closes, with a click and a seal, and the outside air suddenly cut off. His mother approached me before she left. She came over with her coat already on, handbag over her arm, her husband a half step behind her. She looked at me with the full weight of whatever she'd been carrying since our conversation by the fireplace. I want to apologize, she said. The invitation, that was careless on my part. I studied her. She meant it, in the limited way that people mean things when they're apologizing for the symptom and not the disease. But I didn't need her to go deeper. That was my daughter's work to do with her own husband. This woman before me had simply assumed that possession equaled ownership, and in my experience, a great many people make that assumption about a great many things. Houses, relationships, mothers. I appreciate that, I said. This house has been in my family for 53 years. It belonged to my parents, and then it came to me, and it will go to whoever I choose after that. I kept my voice level. I'd just like everyone to know that, going forward. She nodded. Her husband looked at his shoes. They left, and I watched them go through the window that looks out at the maple, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph, not even satisfaction, exactly. More like the feeling of placing something back where it belongs after finding it knocked sideways. My son-in-law and I didn't have our real conversation that day. Some things take time and willingness, and he needed more of both. But 3 days after the party, he appeared at my apartment in town and stood in my doorway with his hands in his pockets and the look on his face of a man who has been argued with by his wife until he understood he had no good argument left. I want to talk, he said. Come in then. We sat at my kitchen table. I poured him coffee. Not because he deserved the gesture, but because my mother taught me that offering something warm to drink is how you signal you're willing to be in the room with someone. He said he hadn't meant to erase me. I said I believed that, which was true. Erasure is rarely intentional. It's cumulative. It's the nameplate on the mailbox. It's the invitation sent without a second thought. It's 3 years of small omissions that add up quietly and politely to a disappearance. He said he understood. The house was mine. I said good, and that I'd like a simple written agreement in place. Not out of distrust, but out of clarity. He agreed, reluctantly at first, and then less reluctantly when I explained that clarity protects everyone, including him. He said he was sorry my name wasn't on the invite. I said, that's where we start. It wasn't a reconciliation, it was a negotiation, but it was honest, and between the two of us, that was new. My daughter called that night, after he'd gone home. She said she'd seen the nameplate being changed on the mailbox that morning. She said it the way you report weather. Calm, factual, but I heard what was underneath it. She was learning to notice things again, to say them out loud. Good, I said. She'd like to know if you'd come for Sunday dinner next week, my daughter said, and if you'd want to stay the night. That's my house, I said. I'll stay in the room I choose. A pause, then a small laugh, the first real one I'd heard from her, and I didn't know how long. Fair enough, she said. Which room? The front bedroom, I said. The one with the maple tree view. The one I grew up in. The one I had given up without ever being asked to, without ever saying the words, this is still mine. I framed the deed last spring. Not the original. I had that stored properly, but a clean copy, the kind that reads clearly from across a room. I hung it in the hallway of the house on Clover Mill Road, not to prove a point, to make a fact visible. My daughter saw it on her next visit. She stood in the hall and looked at it for a long while without saying anything. It's so you know, I said. She understood. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a mother who's been quiet for too long. When you finally speak plainly, you're certain it's going to cost you everything. You think the relationship will snap like something you've been handling too carefully, too gingerly, too afraid of for years. But sometimes it doesn't snap. Sometimes it holds. Sometimes it holds better than it did before, because it's not pretending anymore. The oak coat rack is back in the hall now. The one with the ceramic hooks, one painted for each of us. My daughter reinstalled it herself on a Sunday afternoon while I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea. I heard the drill and then the quiet and then her voice from the hallway. "Mom, come see." I went. There it was, in the right place, the way it always should have been. Some things you have to plant and wait for. Some things come back on their own if you stop accepting their absence long enough to say so out loud. The maple out front is deep orange now, the same as it has been every October for 50 years. On clear mornings I can see it from the front bedroom window, and I stay a little longer than I need to, watching the light move through it before I go downstairs to make coffee. My coffee, my kitchen. The house my father built his life around and handed to me like a gift I didn't know I was allowed to keep. I'm keeping it. I've already decided. And this time, I intend to say so whenever it needs saying. For as long as it takes for everyone to understand that the woman who stayed quiet was never the woman who disappeared. She was just the one they hadn't learned to see yet.